Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. This morning in studio, privileged to have the presence of Senator Richard Onyonka, Kisii County. Good morning, Senator.
Thank you, Ayub. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Lovely having you here on a momentous day. Looking forward to the events that will be transpiring, and also Senior Counsel Abdikadir Mohammed. Good morning.
Good to see you, Abu.
Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Let's begin with a look at what has been happening and largely informs the front pages of the publications. And on page 5, the Gen Zs of the Daily Nation, that is why we are back on the streets. They say that we can only negotiate with the president until we will not negotiate with the president until the killer cops are punished. This is in relation to some of the deaths that have been recorded so far across the country, and more than 600 who are in police custody and who the clergy says ought to be released for the dialogue to happen as called for by the president on Saturday. And coming to you first, Senator, and picking up from this point, seems that despite the framework that has been laid by the government, it seems there's no goodwill also, to the extent of now more than 600 Kenyans who are in custody. But the Gen Zs are saying we can only come to that negotiating table when your hands are clean.
Good morning, Ayub, and good morning, my brother, Senior Counsel Abdikadir, who I spent a lot of wonderful times at the National Assembly. The truth is, this is a momentous time for our country. It's a momentous time because, one, it needs exceptional intervention. It needs exceptional interpretation of what's going on. In another language, I would say it needs men and women of wisdom to get us out of where we are. The truth is, personally, I am not shocked about what is happening, for the simple reason that before that, I had talked about it here, Ayub. I had raised my concerns, and that came out of the fact that the information that this country has, including the government machinery, if they were very careful and they were observing and watching the trends, the political trends and economic trends for our country, they would have noticed that we are on the 20-year cycle again. We had reached a stage where our country is at a position where it's either going to tip and go down the lake, or it is going to tip and picks up. And how I would wish that we would tip going up. And I've been watching, and like every Kenyan is watching.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about people in the diaspora, you're talking about other governments. This whole exercise has actually brought in another dimension. It's now becoming Pan-African. It's now becoming, oh, you mean Kenyan youth can do this? It's now beginning to make very many people begin to look at technology. What is the relevance of technology in terms of our lives today? And what has just happened, Ayub, is that the Kenyan youth have basically told the government of their day that we don't want stories, that we want corruption to stop. They have told leadership, the Kenyan governments don't want to see us. They don't want to talk to senators, they don't want to talk to members of parliament. Why? Because we are part of the problem. So anybody who's going to look at this thing, yes, we are going to look at this thing that we hold Ruto responsible because he's the president, he's the head of state. But I can assure you, Ayub, it's the whole ruling elite in this republic. You're going to have to decide whether you are going to have a country with the rule of law, that a country that has no corruption, that a country that is equitable, fair and just, a country that is going to take care of its most vulnerable. If you do not attack and deal with these issues now, President Ruto can forget that these youths are going to listen to him. Why? They have no jobs. Where are they? They're in the streets. What are they doing? They're hungry. They listen to Giuliani. He's talking about niko na njaa, siwezi kulala. These are the realities that these youths are facing. And then what are we doing? We as the ruling class who are advantaged have now moved in. What are we doing? We are behaving as if we are cowboys. We are driving in the most expensive cars in the world. We are living in houses which are unbelievable. We are posting things on social TV about fundraisings and how we carry money in gunny bags to fundraisings. The youths have just told us, they're our mirror. They have told us, look at our churches. What have the priests become? What are the members of the mosques become? What have we become as Pentecostal churches? When we are preaching about how to become rich, that God wants you to become rich, and in fact you can do anything to become rich, and you need to pray. And yet this culture where we are actually telling people they can actually, yes, become rich, but if you have an opportunity to steal resources from the state, then it is God who has rewarded you. This belief that we have, that when somebody is walking on the streets and you look at them and they look like they're running mad, you think it is because they're running mad. No, it's because you have made them become mad.
Okay.
So that is where these youths are. And unless President William Ruto gets the hand of God on him, we are in a mess.
Senior Counsel, coming to you. If you look at some of the demands that the Gen Zs have highlighted, for example, the point of dialogue, talk with us, we have problems. They largely pointed out governance issues. Now they are demanding for the release of those who are in custody, the police officials who are accused of shooting innocent protesting civilians to be brought to book. Still, it seems that they are not contented.
Yes.
What then are we not seeing from the perspective of these Gen Zs and young Kenyans, from governance perspective, that we must address going forward, even as the framework of this dialogue is laid by the government?
Well, thank you very much. And largely, I agree with the Senator. I think his finger right on the button. Excuse me. I think it's an inflection point. We could go left or right. We could go on a slippery slope, essentially. We could go how Sudan went, or we could really, this could be a very hopeful moment, so to speak. These young people are absolutely right, and they are the hope for the country. How this is driven forward is very critical for everybody, including them. As I say many times, our Katiba resolved the legal issues, but our cultural ethos, our political ethos, governance, accountability, corruption, these are huge cultural issues that these young people are seeing and that require resolution, so that our politics as is now is not good for purpose. Our institutions, especially, and I know Senator for a long time, and I have a lot of regard for him, but the institution Senator serves in Parliament, not necessarily the Senate, Parliament. It's one of the biggest letdowns, because Parliament essentially was supposed to be the people's watchman, the people's watchdog, and the people's watchdog abdicated to. So I think the critical point for all of us as Kenyans is, how do we benefit from the hopeful moment ushered in by the young people's agitation, and how do we avoid slipping down that slippery slope to destruction? This is really the moment, and it's a very critical moment, and it's a short period, and I agree with Senator, what is needed absolutely is wise leadership and wise minds, both among the governing class, and to an extent among the young people also. So that what we want is to improve things. What we want is the people are celebrating the young people. The people are jubilating for the young people and with the young people. Time has come for the young people to understand also that comes with responsibility. Power comes with responsibility. Power without responsibility, they say, is the province of the prostitute. It's only the prostitute who has power without responsibility. It's a common phrase. But what we want is power that comes with responsibility. How do we go forward from here as a country so that we benefit from the critical issues they have brought on the table? We benefit from resolving the critical issues they have brought on the table. Going forward, their demands are absolutely fair. Number one, if you have killed anybody, anytime anybody dies, our criminal law is somebody must be responsible.
Okay.
Somebody must be held responsible. There must be an inquest. There must be an inquiry. And if there's somebody who is responsible, that person must be punished. That's a perfectly reasonable demand. The rest of the young people, if you are demonstrating peacefully and you are arrested, you are wrongfully arrested, you ought to be released. On the other hand, if you destroyed somebody's shop or if you destroyed somebody's property, the law is equally applied.
Okay.
It is not applied to you because you are young or you're old. Of course, there are certain ages below which you are not criminally responsible, but so long as you are an adult, that responsibility comes. So the idea is, I think, how do we focus on this point so that we have a country that has benefited out of this phase? This inflection point takes us to the right place, not to the wrong end.
Okay, and then let's, and you largely pointed out the role of Parliament, which is very central and consequential. We'll look at our constitutional architecture and the arms of government they are in. But if you look at the recently concluded talks at the Bomas of Kenya, the National Dialogue, the committee NATCO came up with a report which largely addressed constitutional issues rather than the economic problems that the young people who are the face of the opposition protests had largely rallied behind the Azimio coalition. For example, it was about the cost of living, bringing those who were brutally murdered by police, get them justice, bring those who are culpable to the books. But it seems that they are also watching a political class that is largely hell-bent on addressing political issues rather than the very same issues that touch on the fabric of the society. And is this what's driving this course? Absolutely.
I think there are many of us who were at the point where we were wondering whether, I mean, if you live in this country, it's like people live on two different planets. The political class and a few people who are in the right live in one planet, and everybody lives in another planet. Government is not working as is, and we have to correct the ship of government. Now, the hope was that the new constitution and the new regime of laws would do that. That came in, and we have a government that really doesn't care about the laws. We're supposed to have an IEBC in place long ago. How come we don't have it in place? There's absolutely no reason. Absolutely no reason why we don't have, other than the fact that the government of the day has no respect for the Constitution. We have reports from the Auditor General or from the Controller of Budget or from many other institutions. It's because the government doesn't really care. The implementation of these issues are with the executive. The oversight is with Parliament. Both of them have failed. I usually say there's a reason why KRA is very efficient and the EACC is in limbo, because the government of the day is interested in having KRA efficient. Without KRA, they don't get the money. But they have no interest in the accountability side. Now, how do we do that? The idea was our constitutional infrastructure is such that the institutions are supposed to make each other work, and they're supposed to be a watch on each other, and they're supposed to check each other's excesses. When you remove Parliament out of the equation, because essentially Parliament is off the table right now. Parliament exists only in name, only in the fact that my colleagues, my good friends, Senator, my Senator, I hope he'll forgive me, but they are there only in name. Parliament, the Senate has a limited role, but the key house that has the key function on the budget is the National Assembly, and the National Assembly has basically taken off. You saw how parliamentarians who one day before were willing to die to pass this bill. Cheer. Cheer when the president says, I think everything you have done is rubbish. I am sending it back and I'm telling you to delete every, you're clapping, to delete every item. I mean, that's a completely unheard of. Parliament's committee chairs are chosen in State House. It's supposed to be an election. When I was in Parliament and my colleague, and we used to vote for the chairs of the committees. I have served on committees. And I have been chairing committees, and I was elected, and they were competitive. Of course, the political groupings will have a role, But it's a competition. It's voted for. And it's a secret ballot. I was voted for. I was in the PNU side, but I was voted for by ODM members because secret ballot. Now that is no longer there. There's a list of committee chairs issued by State House when the new House sits.
Yeah.
And you go to State House for direction on every item. And the road started with the first parliament after the new constitution, the 11th parliament. Remember the one where Duale was the majority leader and Muturi was those people wrote the worst history possible for parliament. Duale essentially felt he was an officer of the president. He was executing government business. There is nothing like government business in our presidential system. It's a majority and the minority. And you could very well have a situation where the president is from one party and the majority in the House is another party.
Yes.
Just like you could have Nairobi County having one government that is in ODM and the next county having a different party. So the whole idea that the majority leader of parliament and the speaker of parliament believe they are officers of the president that is the fallacy. That is where, that is the root cause. Parliament ought to understand its role as an independent institution whose business is to check the executive. Okay, and it seems there's the obsession at the parliamentary level when it comes to acting more or less as an appendage to the executive, and we'll be talking more about that then, because also there are powers that are granted, especially the budgeting aspect that you talked about, and wherein constitutional officers have pointed out, raised the red flags, and where Parliament was set to act as the guardrail, they have, as the public sees, dropped the ball, and therefore which informs why there is trust which is at an all-time low. But coming to you, Senator Richard Onyonka, I'm sure you want to supplement what Senior Counsel has said, but look at this report by the World Bank, which was released in 2019, titled The Elite Capture of Foreign Aid. This was an audit between 1990 and 2010, 20-year period, where Kenyan politicians and their accomplices stole over 3.6 billion Kenya shillings. That's roughly then by 360 billion Kenya shillings, which mathematically, if you have to break down that number over the 20-year period, meant 18 billion Kenya shillings stolen every year, 1.5 billion every month, and 50 million every day, and 2 million Kenya shillings every hour for 20 years. And this was during the reign of the Jubilee Party. Then look at this report also, which was according to the National Assembly Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, tabled in the House in 2019, October, financial years 2016, 17, 17, 18, where the National Treasury released 120 billion to fund the construction of 8 mega dams, some which never saw the light of day. And that includes the 120 billion. If you mathematically break down, 60 billion every year, 5 billion every month, 1.7 billion every day, and 70 million Kenya shillings disappearing every single hour for that financial year under the Jubilee government. This is what the agencies are watching, the born 97s, and this is report between 1990 and 2010. They have justifiable ground, is it, to hold the government to account?
Ayub, I wanted to explain to you that I have been sitting and running through this narrative. And that is why when I came here and sat and said, if you don't watch and look at what you're going to do about these young people, they're going to come into the streets. It is because Kenya has had this history over a period of 20 years. If you go back to before independence, we got our independence in 1962. If you look at the turmoil that was before that, it took a period of 20 years before the British agreed to give us independence. You come from 63. 63. Now move on. The next time we have a crisis was 1982 when there was a coup. That coup was organized, was planned by young people in the military and the university. Those were the Gen Zs of that time. That's what nobody ever talks about. It was not about wanting to remove Moi from power. They were talking about unequal development, unequal distribution of resources, demonstration, violating human rights, the tribalism. Moi had just come in, and at that time, that is when he was, violating human rights, the tribalism. Moi had just come in, and at that time, that is when he was being Then you come from 2000, and then you had now the elections were averted by Kibaki taking over power, by Moi not having Section 2A, and the Section 2A was repealed.
Yes.
Give it another 20 years. From 82, you then come directly to what? 2002, 2007, we have the tribal clashes, then we have a problem with our constitution, then the constitution is voted for 2010, then we come to where we are today, another 20 years. What the youths are talking about, there's a trend, and this trend has, historically, if you look at what happened during Kenyatta's government, here you are, Mr. President, it looks like you're grabbing everything. Why is it that your community is the one which is getting the resources of this country, including land distribution? That is where you had the dispute between the Murumbis, the Bildad Kagias, the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Mr. President, don't do that. What happens? Kenyatta hands over to Moi. Moi said he will continue with what Kenyatta was doing. Fuata nyayo. He then continues again with these issues of violation of land rights, human rights abuses. The corruption then picks on and it goes on. Moi comes, finally Kibaki comes on board. When Kibaki comes, the coalition government have left the fight. The coalition government comes in, Ayub. What is it trying to do? Let us try and have fairness in equitable distribution of resources. We now have a new constitution. Let us now proceed. The Kenya needs to be a democratic country. Let us make sure that our structures work. We become a country of rule of law. The resources are going to be managed well so that then we can continue growing and then we take off. You remember we were supposed to take off? You can't take off. That report tells you the elite systematically plan, coordinate and organize, give us education, create industries so that you can export some items, so that you can take care of your domestic needs. Those policies end up being thrown away. What do? Now we realize we are going to continue with expansive and expensive borrowing. We now we increase our debt from 1.2 trillion. In a period of 10 years, we are at 9.6 to 10 trillion in 10 years, which means we are borrowing $1 trillion a year. Let us go and check which projects has the government done over this period. None. How can you spend? 4 goes to the county government. Okay. The money is eaten by the government, kept by the members of the county assembly, the assembly at the local level, and the assembly at the national level, which are supposed to oversight the executive, are part of the eating.
Thank you.
So the eating is sweet now, and the youths have said, you can't eat like that.
Thank you. When we get back from the break, Senior Counsel, we'll further talk about the real power in our lawmakers, and also the key functions that they play in terms of the budget process you talked about, the power they hold or yield to that extent, and by extension also what Senator Onyonka talked about, because the controller of budget made some approvals amounting to 2.7 trillion Kenya shillings, and only 17% went into development expenditure as per her report for the first 9 months of the financial year 2023-2024. This is Daybreak, and we welcome your contributions. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We proceed with the Senator and the Senior Counsel after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.